tonight. So tomorrow will be the one-year anniversary of the landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, which gave corporations and other organizations the ability to spend unlimited amounts of money on independent campaigns to support their preferred candidates and issues. Now, since that ruling, campaign finance reform advocates have been calling for legislation that would limit private influence. Tomorrow, several groups are going to be presenting new evidence showing support for reforms right here in New York. One of them is the Brennan Center for Justice, where my next guest works. Ciara Spelliscy is a counsel for the Center's Democracy Program. She's joining us tonight from New York City. Ciara, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So apparently, I actually just learned this. The Citizens United anniversary, if you will, is going to be not necessarily celebrated, but marked nationally with protests and various different events to highlight yet again this issue, which just goes to show you exactly how significant it is, actually.
Yes, we're expecting protests in front of the Supreme Court, for example.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, the history here is that nonprofits or 501c4s and independent committees have been around for a long time. But the difference now is that they can spend unlimited amounts of money, and we saw in the elections that just passed that they were just booming all over the place. And how significant was the growth, actually?
The use of nonprofits, including 501c4s, has been growing over time. One of the big changes that Citizens United created at the federal level is C4s before Citizens United could not have money from for-profit businesses and also do campaign ads in a federal election.
Right.
They had to be totally nonprofit or funded by individuals. And one of the big changes that we saw with Citizens United is business corporations could hide behind a C4, spend in the election, and then consumers, public, voters were none the wiser.
So do we have, we saw it right here in New York. We saw a number of independent organizations. There was one, for example, that Karl Rove was instrumental in, but there were a number of them active. Is there some quantifiable number at this point about just how active they were in the past cycle?
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but it was a big jump.
Right.
Corporations, especially in federal elections, had previously been banned from participating in federal elections ever since 1947. So it was a 60-year change that we saw in the last election cycle.
Now, lest anybody think that this is actually a phenomenon that is limited to the federal level, there are also independent committees that are active, very active, right here in New York. We've got one called the Committee to Save New York that my viewers are quite familiar with. It's very pro-Andrew Cuomo, and it is funded by businesses and the real estate industry, which are not disclosing their donors. So, is there a way that the state can change its law that would not be superseded by the federal decision in Citizens United that would be able to address the issue of transparency?
Yes, indeed. The state of New York can change its election law. The reporting in New York is about 30 years out of date. So one of the key things that New York needs to do is it needs to require reporting of independent expenditures. Those are the ads that use Buckley's magic words, vote for, vote against.
Right.
They also need to capture what are known as sham issue ads or electioneering communications. And these are the ads that run right on election eve. They feature a candidate. There's usually ominous music. It's really clear to the viewer that you're not supposed to support that candidate. So New York needs to change its election laws to capture sham issue ads as well. The other thing that New York can do is it can change its corporate law. So it could give shareholders more transparency directly from the corporations that they are invested in. And they could give shareholders a vote on future political spending by corporations.
Now, actually, another thing that good government advocates have been suggesting is circumnavigating this issue in some way by undercutting the power of private money by creating public campaign finance systems. So you would actually increase the power of small dollar donors if you had a matching system. And do you believe that that actually would be, if all things were equal, the laws were not changed for transparency, the private entities still had the ability to spend as much as they wanted, but there was public campaign finance, would that actually help improve the power of the individual donor?
Public campaign finance is one of the game changers, and we encourage the new governor and the Assembly and the Senate to work together to pass public financing. I mean, one of the ways to empower our elected officials to be able to say no to special interests is to give them an alternative to the campaign financing that comes from, for instance, lobbyists. Lobbyists are huge bundlers of other people's campaign contributions, and that gives lobbyists an enormous amount of power. One of the things that they can do is get a lawmaker's attention, and they get the lawmaker's attention because the lawmaker relies on lobbyists to gather and solicit campaign contributions for that politician.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Ciara Spelliscy, for marking the Citizens United anniversary with us. In good government parlance, perhaps not such a happy anniversary, but nonetheless, it is a significant one.
Thank you so much for having me.